This is DJ Free Leonard here with the Boots of the Coup, showing solidarity for Leonard Peltier, a Native American political prisoner who's been locked down for the last 40 years. We're organizing in the hip hop community, using hip hop as a tool for liberation, and just like to have Boots show some solidarity and mainly ask you, how does Leonard Peltier inspire you?
Well, Leonard Peltier was or is a freedom fighter that is currently locked up on trumped up charges. Um, it's mainly to stop the movement. It wasn't about stopping him, but it was about trying to hold up the movement that he was part of building, which is the real crime that the state has committed. Um, this is a movement that that questioned the very nature of capitalism. For capitalism to begin, it had to steal labor and steal land, primitive accumulation. And what AIM was doing at the time was questioning that basis of capitalism and whether this could be the land of the free, supposedly, as they claim it is, when it's built upon murder and theft. And so um, Leonard Peltier's whole life has been dedicated to putting that question at the forefront, which is one of the keys to destroying the system. Is the analysis that tells us that this system is predicated on theft and murder and exploitation of labor. So, um, someone dedicating their life to this is definitely um, one of the things that I answer to in my head when I'm deciding whether I should give up every morning. Um, and and I'm sure there's things that inspire him to keep going. And this is just part of how we're all connected, um, how we're connected to past generations and to elders is through this conversation we have in our heads. What, who do, how do we want our life to answer their call? There's a call and response that keeps going on generation over generation, and
Yes.
where do we stand in that? And so Leonard Peltier has been one of uh, those calls that I have to answer to with my life.
Right on. As some of the viewers at home may or may not know, Leonard Peltier is part of the American Indian movement, and which is organization to fight for the sovereign rights and being as a sovereign nation within the U.S. And just to identify with that, a lot of people that those issues, people have a hard time identifying with those, and so. Definitely at the root of that is capitalism, as you mentioned, and what built capitalism. And so Leonard Peltier actually saying enough is enough, and as the Pine Ridge Reservation was being seized, was a land seizure to give the land over 60 corporations for all the energy deposits on the land. And during that time, the shootout occurred on the Pine Ridge Reservation. Um, with over 12 paramilitary groups that raided the reservation at this time. And Leonard Peltier was asked to come to Pine Ridge. He was in Seattle. He had an auto repair shop where he had community groups at night in the evenings when it closed down. And he could have been doing his day-to-day life, but he was asked by the American Indian Movement to come out there and take a stand to leave his day-to-day things to come out here and try to bring order to this reservation because it was being funded by goon squad. It was being funded by the government was funding a goon squad to shoot up the reservation. It was a very violent time, and just having to take all these contradictions and these issues, and Leonard Peltier, nobody's perfect, and he said, I'm good enough and I'm strong enough to go out here and lead the people when there are other members that didn't want to take arms and and nothing wrong with it, and to spiritually pray for freedom, and it is part of the spiritual resistance. And I feel like your music helps motivate organizers like me to get the word out and to fight, because uh, it's easy to be against the system, but to really have a clear positions on the structures and the dynamics of a revolutionary, and to be doing that for so long with going into all these different arenas around the world, and to be carrying a message, I really salute that, and that's why I'm honored to have you here today.
Thank you
And
for the work that you're doing and
thank
bringing
you.
light to Leonard Peltier.
Have a lot of have you heard Leonard's name out there in the community a lot throughout the years? Like
Honestly, not. I mean,
not as yeah,
so, sometimes it's what he's the Green Party presidential candidate
or
a few
peace and
times.
freedom.
Peace
Yeah,
and freedom.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I've there's times when I um, wanted to vote on a local proposition,
Hmm.
but was definitely not going to vote for president. And I've clicked and I've checked off Leonard Peltier
Hmm.
as a symbol of not buying into the system.
Right on.
And
Just to add to that, in 2004, Leonard Peltier was nominated for the Peace and Freedom Party president, and he received over 20,000 votes in California alone. And it was the only state that put him on the ballot, but just 20,000
while he's in prison,
while he's in prison, locked up for over 30 years at that point. And that resistance, it runs deep out here. There's not that many platforms for everyone to raise awareness. So 2010, I'd say let's use hip hop to get the dialogue going, and start getting more uh, uh, radio shows, more just because, well, we got something active going, because in cases of political prisoners, there may not be happening anything in the court system for there to be any news coverage on the case. So as organizers, we have to kind of generate that propaganda to counterbalance what's going on, that what we're being colonized with on a daily basis. And much respect to you. Thank you for taking your time. And are there any other political prisoners you wanted to shout out, or anything?
well, Mumia Abu Jamal.
Yeah,
That's one. There's there are so many
yeah,
um, right now. But I think it's interesting. We're dealing with the idea of political prisoners. Um, Over the last few years, I've gone to Italy a lot. I've gone to Europe a lot. In Italy, they happen to have had a strong radical movement for a while. Matter of fact, they were almost going to have a communist revolution, but the U.S. actually stopped, physically stopped them. And that was in the 40s. But so since then, they've had very strong radical movements, and um, so much so that they'll shut down big patches of industry. They'll, you know, they have they have this whole movement of squats, which are actually there. It's not just about the squat, but it's about just having a home base for doing campaigns and things like that.
yeah.
So there are radical movements, and one of the one of the things that I heard as of like 10 years ago, um, a lot of times they didn't put they stopped putting people in prison that were, for instance, in some of the more radical organizations, because they just kept getting broken out. Like,
Yeah.
somebody that was a communist, if they got put in prison, everybody and all the prisoners would stay away from them, because they know at some point one of the walls is going to explode and they're going to go walking out, and they don't want to be near the exploding wall.
Wow.
Um, and so it just got to the point where then, of course, then the government would put these folks back in, and then more people would break them out, and then there was more going on the street. That what they were really worried about is the move, not just those leaders. It wasn't really a focus on, because it wasn't a focus on just those leaders that were in there, but it was a focus on building a movement that was viable. So what I'm saying is, I think one of the biggest things we could do to uh, to move forward in stopping there from being more political prisoners, and from and towards getting these political prisoners out is building a radical movement that's viable for stopping industry and shutting things down. Uh, what's happening? And and that and something that, while at the same time we bring light to folks like Leonard Peltier and Mumia and Asada, if there's a movement that's strong enough that keeps going, then there ends up not being the motivation to lock these folks up.
Yeah.
But but it becomes harder to get these folks out when there's no movement around other things, right?
Yeah.
It's a high tide raises all boats.
Yeah, you gotta mobilize.
So well, and not just mobilize around those things, but so for instance, one of the things that they do to us is someone gets locked up, and I've seen it in much smaller ways. Someone gets locked up, and it demoralizes everybody. Like, okay, shit, I don't want to spend my life in prison, or or I don't see how we can fight this big monster. Because the truth is, what can we do? We can't, we're going to keep going to court for 40 years, things like that. That's one of the things we have to do. But that demoralizes everyone, and it's like, okay, now we leave it up to the lawyers. So, or we have a big demonstration and we hope that some judge, rules in our favor because they see how many people are out there. But the real thing is that if we have movements that are working around all the things that these folks were working around when they got locked up, then we destroy the motivation for that tactic of the state to use, right?
Yeah.
So meaning this, Leonard Peltier is locked up, we got to get him out. But there has to be more Leonard Peltiers out there working around other things.
Yes.
In order to make that tactic not work. In the U.S., we've let that tactic work. We've let that tactic work. And so we have to build a mass, militant, radical movement that uses the withholding of labor as a tactic in shutting industry down and getting our demands met.
Right. Yes, sir. Yeah,
and we have to build one that's not reliant on just a couple leaders, because they'll lock those couple leaders up. We have to have our leaders have to build more leaders, and in this way, those tactics become useless by the state.
Yes, and keeping just this basic dialogue going, as I feel like indigenous resistance has been outlawed in many ways through the language, the culture, the religion, and the politics, and just this political dialogue. If you just soak it up, maybe rewind this at home and just really think how do we carry on what Leonard Peltier was fighting for before he went to Pine Ridge and before he was locked up, and what does he continue to fight for? Being locked up as prisoner rights and being a leader that has demanded the attention of several human rights leaders around the world, and he's an innocent man. The court trials clearly show that Leonard Peltier is innocent. There was a previous trial where 2 people were found not guilty by reason of self-defense. The jury understood the context of what was going on Pine Ridge. Later, Leonard Peltier is in a separate trial. That trial completely contradicts the theory. All the prosecution's whole case is all contradicted the previous trial when they tried to pin it on Bob Robin and Nino Butler. And Leonard Peltier, even the assistant prosecutor, came out in 1985 and said, we can't prove who shot the agents. Assistant prosecutor Lynn Crooks, and he's held in prison. He was supposed to be convicted beyond a reasonable doubt. And the assistant prosecutor has even said that. So if we take this case and use this as an example, but then there's so many going on across the country of political prisoners, social injustice, police terrorism every day, that it all connects, but maybe not in the way you first think it as. Why we're connecting on political prisoners. There's deeper things going on out there, and salute to Boots, and salute to all hip hop artists that use this as a medium to raise awareness, and as use this to organize people to um, to get the word out for all these different injustices that are going on. Not just Leonard. There's so many different Leonard Peltiers. There's so many political prisoners and innocent people in prison, and
But
that we don't hear about.
his case is important, and
Yeah.
not just his case, in the sense of letting people know, how this, how how the state works when it's supposed to be freedom of speech.
Yeah.
How and as you said, they hired folks to break up this movement, and what we're everyone a lot of people are under the assumption that this isn't like you know um, these totalitarian systems we hear about, and it's not. The reason that it's not is because they lie to us and they make us think that we have the freedom to do all of these different things, and the reality is we don't. We just don't do these different things, and as soon as you do something, they're stepping up against you.
Mhm.
You could be, and the only way to fight that is organization.
Yeah.
The only way to fight that is organization, and to keep building the movement. And putting his case out there is very important in shedding light on the dastardly ways that this system works.
Definitely.
And so I salute you for doing the work and putting it
Respect.
out there.
Yeah. Just following in the footsteps of the OGs, the legends that did it. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us. We're gonna keep it moving, keep organizing in the community. Free Leonard Peltier, free all political prisoners.